Imagine this. It's the early 1960s, late at night, and you're standing at the edge of a racetrack. The grandstands are almost empty. The air smells like fuel, hot brakes, and damp tarmac. Somewhere in the distance, a V8 clears its throat and then roars down the main straight. But this isn't a Ferrari or an Aston Martin. What's flying past you is something different, something almost wrong on paper. It's a light, simple British roadster with a big, angry American V8 shoved under the hood. And that recipe, that clash of worlds, is exactly what created one of the wildest classic cars of all time. This is the story of the Shelby Cobra, a car built from a broken heart, a stubborn idea, and a simple equation. Lightweight chassis plus big V8 equals trouble for everyone else. Let's get into it. To understand the Cobra, you have to start with the man whose name is on it, Carroll Shelby. In the 1950s, Shelby wasn't a builder. He was a driver. He raced everywhere he could in anything fast enough to scare him. His peak moment came in 1959 when he won the 24 Hours of Le Mans driving for Aston Martin. On paper, his career was on the way up. Inside his body, something else was happening. Shelby had serious heart problems. Doctors were blunt with him. Keep racing, and you might not live long enough to enjoy the trophies. So he did something almost no racer wants to do. He stepped out of the cockpit, but he didn't step away from racing. Instead, he started thinking like this. If I can't be the one driving the winning car, maybe I can be the one building it. And in his head, one idea kept looping. Take a light, agile European sports car and give it a big American V8. Simple, dangerous, perfect. On the other side of the Atlantic, in a small town called Thames Ditton in England, there was a company called AC Cars. They were building a pretty little roadster called the AC Ace. It had an aluminum body, a light tubular chassis, nice proportions, but not a lot of power. Worse, the engine they were using was about to go out of production. They needed a new heart for their car. At the same time, Ford in America had just developed a new small block V8. Carroll Shelby saw an opportunity. He wrote to AC and basically said, "You've got a great chassis with no engine. Ford has a new V8. Let's put them together." AC said yes. Ford said yes. And suddenly you had a very unlikely three-way partnership. British craftsmanship, American horsepower, and a stubborn Texan in the middle. The first prototype was built in 1962. AC shipped a modified Ace rolling chassis, no engine, to Shelby's new shop, Shelby American, in Los Angeles. Waiting for it was Ford's new V8. The first car, chassis number CSX 2000, used a 260 cubic inch V8, around 4.2 liters. It wasn't the biggest engine Ford made, but in a light, compact roadster, it turned the car into a completely different animal. The transformation was brutal. The Ace had been a pretty, polite sports car. The Cobra, as Shelby decided to call it, was loud, raw, and genuinely violent when you put your foot down. Very quickly, the 260 gave way to a 289 cubic inch V8, about 4.7 liters, and that small block Cobra became the classic spec most people think of today. It was exactly what Shelby had imagined, a light European body with a big American heart. On the street, that meant tire smoke and fear. On the track, it meant something much more serious. It meant Ferrari had a new problem. From the very beginning, Shelby didn't just want a fast road car, he wanted a racing weapon. The Cobra went straight into GT and sports car racing, both in the United States and in international events. It was rough, it was simple, and it was fast. On smaller circuits and shorter races, it started beating cars that were far more exotic on paper. European teams looked at this noisy open-top thing with its crude interior and American badge, and then watched it pass them. But as the speeds went up, a problem became obvious. The Cobra's shape was about as aerodynamic as a brick. On long straights and high-speed tracks, Ferrari still had an edge. Shelby and his team needed a smarter answer, not just more power. That answer came in the form of a new body for a familiar chassis. It was called the Shelby Daytona Coupe. Designed by Peter Brock, the Daytona took the basic Cobra underpinnings and wrapped them in a sleek, wind-cheated shape with a long nose and a chopped-off camtail rear. Underneath, it was still a Cobra. Over the top, it was a different animal. Suddenly, at very high speeds, the balance of power started to shift. In 1965, Shelby's Cobras and Daytona Coupes did something huge. They won the FIA Manufacturers Championship in their class, beating Ferrari. For the first time, an American manufacturer had taken an international GT title away from Maranello. The crazy Anglo-American hot rod idea had become a world champion. For most people, though, the image of a Cobra isn't a closed-roof Daytona on the Mulsanne Straight. It's an open car, with fat tires and side pipes, trying to tear the horizon in half. And that's where the story of the big block cars comes in. If the small block 289 Cobra was already wild, Shelby still had one more question. How far can we push this? Ford had a massive 427 cubic inch FEV8, 7.0 liters of big block fury, and Shelby wanted it in the Cobra. To handle that, AC had to redesign the chassis. The new Mark III frame used larger diameter tubing, new suspension with coil springs all around, bigger brakes and wider fenders to cover much fatter tires. Into that went the 427. The result was one of the most extreme road cars of its era. Power figures vary depending on tune, but in semi-competition SEC form, you're looking at around 500 horsepower in a car that still weighed far less than a big GT coupe. On modern roads, a 427 Cobra is still violently fast. In the 1960s, it bordered on ridiculous. Magazines tested it. People tried to time its 0 to 100 runs. Guinness World Records listed it as one of the fastest production cars on the planet at the time. But numbers only tell a small part of the story. Ask anyone who has driven a real 427 Cobra, and you'll hear the same words: brutal, unforgiving, alive. This was not a car for gentle inputs. It was a car that demanded respect and punished arrogance. For all its fame now, the original Cobra story was actually very short. Production ran from 1962 to 1967, and in that time, only somewhere around 1,000 original Cobras were built in total, including the early 260s, the 289s, and the big block 427s. That's it. There were a lot of reasons. The car was extremely focused and uncomfortable for everyday road use. Insurance costs on high-performance cars were rising, emissions and safety regulations were tightening, and Shelby and Ford were shifting more of their attention to other projects. The Ford GT40 program that would go on to dominate Le Mans, and Shelby-tuned Mustangs that linked performance more directly to mass-market cars. By the late 1960s, the original Cobra chapter had essentially closed. But legends don't stop when the factory does. They just move into a different part of the culture. In the decades that followed, the Cobra took on a second life. Because there were so few originals and so many people who wanted one, a whole replica culture grew up around the car. Kit car Cobras, fiberglass bodies, small block V8 swaps, you name it. Some were rough, some were really well done, but all of them proved the same thing. That simple recipe still worked. Lightweight body, big engine, manual gearbox, no nonsense. At the same time, Carroll Shelby and Shelby American returned to the idea themselves. They started building continuation Cobras, new cars built decades later, with official CSX chassis numbers that picked up where the 1960s left off. They weren't cheap toys. They were modern time machines, recreating the feel of the original with just enough modern build quality to make them usable. Meanwhile, the few hundred original 1960s Cobras that survived moved into the highest tiers of the collector world. Cobra race cars with real history, 289 competition cars with scars from famous tracks, 427 SCs with documented stories. These cars started selling at auction for seven figures. They stopped being just cars and became rolling pieces of motorsport art. So why does the Shelby Cobra still hit people so hard today? I think it comes down to three things. First, the formula is emotionally perfect. There's something about a light chassis and a big engine that will always speak directly to car people. It's simple enough to explain to a child and crazy enough to fascinate an engineer. Second, the context. The Cobra sits right in the middle of an era when Ford and Shelby were pushing back against European dominance in racing. Alongside the GT40 and the Shelby Mustangs, the Cobra is part of a bigger story. a story about an American company deciding it had had enough of losing to Ferrari and doing something about it. And third, the character. A Cobra is not a polished, modern supercar. It doesn't have stability control. It doesn't have comfort modes. It doesn't flatter you. What it does is amplify whatever you put into it. Drive badly, and it will scare you. Drive well, and it will give you one of the rawest, most intense experiences you can have behind a steering wheel. So, let's end with a question. If someone handed you the keys to a real Shelby Cobra today, your choice, small block 289 or big block 427, what would you do with it? Would you lock it away as an investment in a climate-controlled garage? Would you take it to a racetrack and try to imagine what it felt like in the mid-60s to chase Ferraris in something this wild? Or would you wake up early on a quiet Sunday, find a stretch of open road, turn off the radio, and just listen? Listen to the V8, the wind, the gears, and your own heartbeat. For me, the Shelby Cobra is more than just a brutal old sports car. It's Carroll Shelby's stubborn idea made real. It's a bridge between British finesse and American excess. And it's one of the purest expressions of what a classic performance car can be. A light chassis, a big heart, and absolutely no fear. A true classic soul